things. I always like to think about AI plus human expertise. We've seen that generally the combination of human and AI gives you the best.
Welcome to the Slowdown Podcast by NIVOZ, the Dutch Institute for Education and Upbringing.
And what they are doing is trying to build an AI tutor that's based on the best teaching methods.
In this episode, we take a moment to reflect on the rapid technological developments, such as generative AI, that are increasingly making their way into education.
But of course there are risks with AI. We can see there are mistakes, there can be misuse of AI by bad actors. I think the biggest risk though is missing out. What we need is experts with good values figuring out how to put AI to use for good.
My name is Jan Jaap Hubeek, and together with Nickel from the Vorm, we're visiting Matt Brittin at Google's headquarters in London.
When I'm hiring people, I'm looking for curiosity, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. Feels to me like those things are vital for our education system, to produce fully functioning, social and capable people.
Matt Brittin is the president of Google's EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa. And he is a key figure in driving Google's strategy across these regions.
But it's really early in generative AI's history, so we're very, very early. And AI is much broader than that. I'd say AI is about sort of spotting patterns, making connections and learning and making predictions. These things are yet to be built, and that's why people like you need to be involved and understand AI. So that's going to accelerate the process, but it's a process which humans are fundamental to.
With a background in media and passion for digital innovation, he plays an essential role in shaping how technology impacts businesses and society.
And so there's a kind of, oh my God, kids are cheating at their homework, how do we stop this? So we want them to be doing critical thinking. We want them to generate a fake essay and then say, tell me why this essay is fake.
Welcome, Matt, in the Dutch podcast from NIVOZ.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I've never done a Dutch podcast before, but my Dutch is not very good.
So we try to do it in English.
Thank you.
Can you tell us, who are you, where are we, and what is your point of view?
Yeah, we're in my office in central London, and I'm Matt Brittin. My job for the last 10 years has been to run Google in Africa, the Middle East and Europe, and I've been at Google for 18 years, man and boy.
Yeah, and what's your role? What's your focus? What's your main goal?
So my job at Google is to bring the best of Google to all the people in all of those different countries across the region, and to try to get those countries represented back to Google in terms of the different cultures. So our mission is to organize the world's information for everyone. And that means we want our products to be built by everyone, to understand different cultures. And, for example, in Africa, hundreds of millions of people are coming online for the first time. It's life-changing. We just launched around 20 new African languages on Google Translate, which we've learned like a child would with AI, so that people can speak their language to Google and understand the web in their language. So that sort of transformational stuff is what I am involved in doing. That's what's kept me here for so long. But I'm stepping down actually in the new year. Time for some new adventures.
Tell me more about Africa. What do you see? What's the AI bringing the people in Africa?
Well, when I started at Google 2007, less than 20% of the people on the planet were online. And now over 70% are. And so in the Netherlands, in the UK, across Europe, we sort of take a lot of the day-to-day technology for granted, even though when we first saw it, it was like a miracle. And so when I spend time in Africa and you see what happens when somebody gets a smartphone for the first time, it changes lives. All the world's information, education, connectivity, communication, really transformational. So I mentioned, being struck by how it changes lives. I was in Soweto when I first took this job, so 10 years ago, and we were supporting a project in a township, very, very poor, no electricity. They'd sort of steal electricity from the grid. And there was a club for kids. There's a tin shed, and they were all in there learning languages and maths from Android tablets. I thought, wow, okay, it's not teachers, it's not as good as teachers, but, this is really changing people's lives. And then talk about AI. So I was back a few months ago in Kenya and in Nigeria. And, I talked to the Minister of Justice in Kenya. She's transforming the whole justice system to push it out into places it couldn't be before through digital technology. We work with a project in Kenya around maternal health, where we're helping people to get ultrasound scans way out by untrained people with $2,000 ultrasound scanners thanks to AI that can help them to improve infant mortality. And, the rate of maternal death in Kenya is like twice the global average. So these kinds of technologies, actually, when you see them in places where there is no alternative and when they haven't happened before, it's so exciting. And sometimes it's harder for us to see the potential benefits where we're used to them around us every day.
How does the culture get affected by AI? Because it's a Western point of view you're bringing to Africa in a way. You're using all the data from the rest of the world. Is the culture changing? Or
so let's step back and sort of think about AI for a minute. Sort of what is it? Where's it come from? Where's it going? I think I mentioned Google Translate, and actually it's understanding language, which of course we tried to do since we started at Google. We got to understand what web pages are about and what's relevant, and building Google Translate that actually led to the breakthroughs that have given us large language models. So it's sort of understanding language, its context and relationships between different words, which has given us this generative AI, which is when most people talk about AI, that's their experience. It's chatbots, it's ChatGPT, or it's Gemini, or it's those kinds of things. But it's really early in generative AI's history. So we're very, very early. And AI is much broader than that. I'd say AI is about sort of spotting patterns, making connections and learning, and making predictions. And so you think about that in terms of chatbots, it's like, what's the most likely next word if I'm talking about this? And it's, been trained on lots of data. But so you're right, your point there on understanding different cultures is really important, because you can only train this technology on what's available in the world. And humans are flawed and data sets are biased. And we know this, that book, Invisible Women, incredibly points that out, how biased the pharmaceutical studies are. I think in the US, they only recently changed to have bulletproof vests that were designed for women, not men. So it's kind of crazy stuff you wouldn't believe going on. So we have to be really careful when we think about the data sets and the training and how we unbias. And in fact, we wrote our principles in 2016 at Google on how we will go about building AI. And one of them is all about sort of understanding and counteracting bias. Now, it takes time. So, but I think you've got to also say, is it better for African kids to be able to learn something or not? And actually, the example I gave wasn't really AI-based learning. It was just the connection. But I think very, very conscious of that. And we're in this moment where large language models by big tech companies seem to be what AI is. So it seems like it's these big models and these chatbots. But that's just the beginning of the capability. And I think what we'll start to see is much more tailored applications. And we won't call it AI. It will just be, this works really well. Whether it's in medicine, like I mentioned, or whether it's in education, these things are yet to be built. And that's why people like you need to be involved and understand AI.
You're working in the future in a way, huh? So you're in today, but your vision is in the future. If you look at education, why is Google so much putting efforts into education? Google is very close in education.
Yeah, I think
what is the main purpose?
Google's mission is organize the world's information, make it accessible and useful to everyone. And obviously that has a huge educational benefit. So it's the heart of what we do. The core of Google still today, even with, smartphones and cloud and AI, is still helping people search for and connect to relevant and useful and accurate information. And in this world of disinformation, misinformation, and proliferation of synthetic content, actually that role is even more important than it's ever been. So that's why we're there. We also run, for example, YouTube, which is where, Khan Academy started, and we might talk about that. And YouTube's a huge education engine. Of course, there's entertainment there and there's short, snacky things. But, if you want to fix your broken washing machine, if you want to learn calculus, if you want to learn how to play the guitar or cook or dance, there are videos there made by people like you showing you what to do. And I think that kind of thing is really, fascinating, and seeing how people learn, particularly when they've got no alternative.
You mentioned the Khan Academy.
Yeah.
Why are you so touched by it?
I think, I first came across it when I first started at Google, and we had Sal Khan come and talk about what he'd done, and, this idea that his nephew and niece, I think it was, that he was teaching by video, preferred a recording than him, because actually they could skip backwards and forwards. And that's what led to the breakthrough. And it was obviously hosted on YouTube. And I think we've supported, financially, particularly in the early years. What's interesting about what they're doing now, I think there's a real concern about what AI is going to do to education. And I'm an amateur, right? I've just got kids who've gone through education, and but that's my experience. So, I'm dangerous. What I think we see is the biggest use for ChatGPT, I'm told, is homework.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of, oh my God, kids are cheating at their homework. How do we stop this? But actually, that's not a very useful use of AI in education. What Khan Academy is doing, and if you haven't read it, his book, Brave New Worlds, How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing.
Yeah, why that's a good thing.
It's really interesting. And what they're doing is trying to build an AI tutor that's based on the best teaching methods. And I mean, in my head, I kind of imagine you're a kid, you play a game, that helps the system, the tutor, to learn. You're interested in football and sailing. You're a visual learner. This is your level of Dutch. This is your level of English. This is your level of mathematics. And then it can tailor its teaching approach to you. And it can do that through the best pedagogic methods, which you'll know better than me. It can pretend to be King Henry VIII. It can create a podcast for the student around the things they're interested in to help them understand the concepts. If they're an auditory learner, it could create video. So I think that kind of vision, never going to substitute for teachers.
Well,
imagine that complementing.
That's you said it earlier when you're talking about the township. You said it will never replace the teacher.
Yeah, well, I think
So what's left for the teacher?
Well, I mean, you can tell me, but I imagine there's a whole raft of social, physical, coaching, signals that you can pick up as a teacher, human experience things. I always like to think about AI plus human expertise. And I think you combine the two. Think about, obviously teachers are using AI today to help them with lesson planning, to reduce the time they spend on admin. Isn't that a good thing? If you can, Google Classroom's really popular. I think that's helped with teacher productivity and managing workloads. So if you can do more of the stuff that only humans can do. Now, I don't have any examples from education because I'm not close to that field. But if I look at our experience in health, we've trained an AI on breast cancer screening, and it can identify the signs of breast cancer from mammograms as accurately as a trained clinician because, it's seen many more and it's been well trained and it's had human input. What does that mean? The clinician can give the woman who's gone in for a scan a no immediately. They can spend their time on those people who are edge cases or need treatment. So the patient experience is better, the productivity of the clinician and the outcomes are better. So that feels like a good use of AI with a professional. I think
what I understood
that's
was
what
that
we'll
the
see more of.
combination was good. AI and a doctor. That combination is more stronger than only the doctor or only AI.
Yeah, I think, we've seen in different fields. We did some stuff in ophthalmology, which is based on, photographs of eyes, for example. We've seen that generally the combination of human and AI gives you the best outcomes. I think it will vary by different types of treatment and therapy. But that's one field where I think you can see human and AI coming together. And another, I think the best application we've yet seen from AI is AlphaFold 3, which our team at DeepMind here in London built. And it's basically, if you were researching in medicine proteins, you need to understand the 3D structure by working through amino acid sequence. It's really complicated. It used to take a PhD student like 5 years. And so there was a database of 175,000 proteins which had been painstakingly discovered, the 3D structures by the academic research by PhD students. And DeepMind were able to train AI on that database, human endeavor, and in a matter of about 24 months, produce the 3D structures of 214 million proteins. So that's a huge contribution from AI. It's just won the Nobel Prize, and every academic and every researcher I've spoken to who's come into contact with it told me it should win the Nobel Prize. But then what needs to happen is the humans then need to, instead of going and get PhD funding for 10 PhDs and take 20 years to do the work, they can pull out of the database. And so people are doing in a day what it would take them 5 years to do previously. So that's going to accelerate the process, but it's a process which humans are fundamental to.
And Nickel is referring to some kind of tension between the mind. AI is it's really with your head working with AI, while you have kids. You need to play and got a whole body, not only your head. So I wonder how you deal with the tension when you work in Africa and the environment and AI. This combination is also very difficult, I imagine. How do you deal with the AI can help the world, but on the other hand, it's a lot of electricity, the water, what is needed. Yeah. It's always the the two sides of the medal. How do you say in English?
Yes, that's right. Two sides of the coin. Very good. I think we talked a bit about the benefits of AI, and I just want to sort of, tie that in a bow for you. So I think the potential of AI to contribute, in health, in climate, in education, in productivity is enormous. And, there are forecasts of billions added to GDP of economies if we deploy AI right. And you can imagine from what I've just talked about, the health outcomes and so on. But of course, there are risks with AI. And I think, we can see there are mistakes. There can be misuse of AI by bad actors. I think the biggest risk, though, is missing out. And what we need is experts with good values figuring out how to put AI to use for good. And I mentioned, we work with a project on maternal health. We work with the clinicians on various things. This is not something which is going to happen on its own. It's going to happen by humans working with the technology and figuring out how to deploy it, figuring out in some cases governments, what are the guardrails, some cases codes of practice, how do we think about this? In some cases there'll be competing AIs with different policies and you choose the one that sort of sits with what you want. So I think we have to, innovation is a team sport. And we need people to be involved in it. And that's why I'd say, even if your focus is on humans and, you guys doing amazing work training teachers, you need to understand the context they're going to be operating in. And it's not the context, that we were taught in.
What would you advise us while we work with schools and teachers how to deal with AI? What is where can we put the focus on to be prepared for the future? And how do we raise our children in this world of fast technology?
Again, I'm a real amateur, so I guess a couple of observations from personal experience. It's not a Google kind of policy or anything. My kids were taught the same stuff in the same way as my parents, the same stuff by the same methods as my parents. One of my sons, the night before his physics exam, I went to see him. He's like, "What are you working on?" And he's like, "I'm learning Russian from Duolingo." Amazing. But not very helpful. And you go to parents' evening, they'd say, if only, he'd write down the 5 bullet points that I told him in class, then he'd be fine. And he's off researching all kinds of amazing stuff, which is really interesting and stimulating, but, the classroom stuff was not so stimulating. I step right back and I say, when I'm hiring people, and obviously education is not just about skills for work. When I'm hiring people, I'm looking for curiosity, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. Feels to me like those things are vital for our education system to produce fully functioning, social and capable people in a world where I can get any fact from a device in my hand in a second. Critical thinking and understanding facts and how to piece them together, and context is going to be important, but it's not going to be quite so important to remember all that stuff as it is to be able to figure out how to harness it and use it creatively for productivity, for society, to educate yourself to be a better person.
Yeah, because that's the clue, to become a better person. And then the big question is, how do you define better?
Yeah.
The interventions that you put in as a teacher have always to do with what you want to teach them, the science test for tomorrow, and maybe not Russian. But altogether, these interventions have a direction. So as a teacher, you must have a vision of the future that you want to bring your pupils towards. And that's where the magic kicks in.
And that's where I'm so excited that you guys are having this conversation, because I think it needs experts to play with this stuff. Right now, I'd say, when I talk to companies and they say, what should we do about AI? I sort of say, well, 3 things. One, you should get everybody playing with it, just to understand it, not to fear it, see what it can do, see what it can't do, mess around. And you'll find some uses that are pretty handy. Like, if you're writing a speech, here's a first draft. It's going to save you a bunch of time. Then get your data to dance. So where's the data that you can use to help the AI be of use to you? So if you're a company, it might be, let's look at all our call center scripts on all our product instructions so that we can help customers get better answers in human language that they understand faster. And companies are doing that kind of thing. And then the third thing I think is think about where AI is going to be strategically important over the long term. And that might not be so clear now. So where can you see fundamental change happening? So if my amateur vision was right and you're going to end up with sort of really amazing AI tutoring, what does that mean the other stuff is, just as you asked me, Jan, the question, what does the human do? So I feel like we've got to experiment and figure those things out. But there are some places where you can sort of see where it's likely to go. Similarly, there's, AI-based education for people who don't have access to lots of teachers. What does that need to look like as well?
How do you balance? You got a nice balance. I watched a lot of videos of you. You work for Google, but you also put a lot of effort in climate group and media. So it looks like you find a nice balance in life between profit and
purpose.
Purpose.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Values.
Thank you for saying that. Obviously, we're all juggling, aren't we, all the time? But I think, as Nickel was just saying, how to be a better person. I think actually, I'm an optimist about most businesses. Most business leaders and people working in businesses I see want to do good business and want to treat people well. And, sometimes the headlines don't make it seem that way, but the vast majority, I think, are there to do that. And so one of the reasons I've been at Google so long is, actually the values in terms of the mission, but also sustainability. The fact if you want technology to work by everyone, it needs to be built by everyone, not just white men in California, for example. Those mean something to me. The fact that we touched on this earlier, actually, but to go back to it, AI is going to be very energy consumptive. So I'm really proud that we've got some data centers in Europe where they're running close to 90% of the time on renewables. So yes, it's energy intensive, but it's running entirely on renewables. And by the way, the amount of energy you need to run a prompt is reducing significantly as we innovate. So I think those things are important. And I think if you're in the fortunate position of working in an organization which has values like that, then it's part of your job to really push for better.
Maybe the last question, a difficult question, maybe ask the listeners. We go to Google. What should we ask? Of what is your concern? And a lot of teachers in just schools in Holland, they said we're a little bit afraid of the big tech. Like Google is big, we're small, and actually they're ruling what we're going to do in a way in our schools. How can they have their balance, like you have found your balance in your life? How can school find a balance between the big tech and their purpose?
I mean, I think that's a very fair question, isn't it? And particularly if you read the sort of headlines, big tech is this thing, it's these big companies, and obviously they're very, very successful companies with lots of innovation and disrupting lots of things. I think I would sort of engage them in a conversation about the specifics. Well, where specifically is this causing you a challenge? And what I hope at Google is, we build tools that work for everyone. So if you want to find out if something's true, if you want to research a lesson plan, go to Google Search and do it. If you want some tools to help manage your students, there's Google Classroom. If you want to communicate in writing, there's Gmail. So look at the tools and how they work. And one of the things I love about Google, and it's different from other tech companies, we were founded to help people find information on the web. We want to get you off our website onto other people's website as quickly as possible. On YouTube, we're hosting videos, podcasts like you make and so on, so that people can reach audiences. And we actually also funding many of those creators through advertising so we can make the web affordable for the kids in Africa and so that YouTube can be free to users. So I think we're trying to build ecosystems there. You innovate on top of them. And so I can understand it's bewildering. So the first thing I'd say, let's engage on where. The second thing I'd say is encourage you to play with the technology. So we're in this moment, I think, in education where there's, oh my God, kids can cheat at tests. What are we going to do? And from my amateur distance, it looks to me like this is an amazing opportunity to change the way we think about what we're educating kids to do. So we want them to be doing critical thinking. We want them to generate a fake essay and then say, tell me why this essay is fake. We want to encourage them in the things I mentioned before: collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking. And if we can do that, then I think we've got an opportunity for people to really unlock their potential. And my final point would be, one of those kids in Africa, somebody without a formal education, can now write as well as you and I can. They can now understand things that are written in hundreds of different languages. They can reach people who've got similar interests all around the world. And, it's breathtaking what this technology can do. So yes, we should be, having an eye on the risks and understanding and addressing those risks. But we should start with how this technology can be harnessed for good, to increase what humans can achieve and to make our world a better, safer, a more sustainable place for many more people. And I think we can close the gap between those who've got less and those who've got more if we put this technology to work.
Equality, yeah.
Yeah, I'm puzzled by the we, because I completely agree with the potential and the examples you bring but there's a mysterious world behind the we.
Okay, let me be clear what I mean by the we. Governments, companies, and organizations.
Exactly.
And organizations include schools and communities.
Exactly.
None of those can do it on their own.
So, no. And I think the difficult part is that people need to start to trust that there is a functioning way that the moral standards are being kept high, which of course I find it difficult to have that trust in the them.
Yeah, and look, there's a whole different podcast we could do on the battle for truth and what are facts.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's something we have to do every day at Google, right? If you ask us a question on Google search, we have to determine which websites to show you. Some questions are factual and unarguable. Some facts are now being argued over, and some things are not factual, but could be harmful if you believe them. And so we have to have policies, and we do, which we publish about how we think about those responsibilities around different types of information. And, the news around us is swirling with this topic at the moment around fact checking and what's happening in the US and so on and so forth. I think what I'd say for Google is it's our responsibility to keep doing our primary mission, which is make information accessible and useful to everyone.
I don't know if you want to talk about the regulation, because I see like the United States is very open and China is very closed, and Europe is regulates how do you look at the European way of regulate AI?
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot of my time in the last few years has been talking to policymakers about technology. And I think, when I started, we used to be sort of outside the room and locked out because people didn't know us and we're distant. And one of the jobs has been to try to show that, we've got Dutch people in the Netherlands who work for Google, who understand the culture and are trying to put the technology to work for good. And over time, we've earned the right, I hope, to be part of the conversation, because as we just said, governments, companies and communities need to work together on this stuff. I think the danger in Europe is that we've gone too far too fast. A German said to me the other day, we built the traffic lights before we built the cars. And if you listen to Mario Draghi, he published, a former European central banker and prime minister of Italy, he published a report a couple of months ago on AI opportunity in Europe and highlighted that there were 100 pieces of regulation in the last 5 years in this area of technology. They are being implemented at different speeds in different countries in different ways. And so one of the things I worry about in Europe actually is we need to be in this game. It's a team sport and we need to be participating. But if you're a startup in Amsterdam or Rotterdam or anywhere in Europe, getting to scale fast is challenging with all of those rules to get through. Maybe it's too hard. If you're a startup in the US, 300 million people, one rule book, away you go. And if you're in China, 1 billion people. So I think one of the challenges is, we never built out the digital single market in Europe. And that's going to slow European innovation down. It doesn't mean to say that we should be left behind if we look to what Draghi recommends, which is, being pragmatic about these things, creating sort of sandbox environments where we can experiment, making sure we've got great talent. By the way, we have amazing technology talent in Europe. And so I think, but we have to pay attention. And, people like you and the people hopefully listening to this podcast need to think, I can't just leave this to one side and wait. I need to be a participant in what's going on in this area.
Yeah, it's a tool and you have to participate.
Yeah.
That's the
use
deal.
it and find out what it's good for and what it's not good for. And actually your use of these tools, of course, shapes them. Because when you're using digital tools, it sees how people use them. Oh, you tried to do this and you failed, and then it improves. So it's a real participation game.
So that's also the advice you give to your own children.
Yeah, play. I mean, of course, within tram lines, right? So when the kids were young, there was rationing of time online. And actually, Google's got this great tool called Family Link, and you can basically control the apps your kids are on and how long they're on those apps for on different devices. So there are rules. Then there's a conversation at some point, which is, okay, you're starting to look for stuff which we might not want you to have found. Let's talk about, the reality. But I think also, the internet and the digital world and the physical world, they're the same place. The digital and physical world are the same place. And you wouldn't put your kid out on the streets of a big city when they're young without teaching them, how to keep themselves safe. And I think the same applies online, and back to the responsibility that teachers and families have around critical thinking and helping keep people safe in the physical world as well as the real world. And we've got responsibilities, of course, as a tech manufacturer to do that, just as governments have to set rules and hold people accountable, but also users and the community have responsibilities too.
Matt, thank you for your point of view.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. Apologies for my Dutch. I have actually been speaking Dutch, but through Google Translate, it's turned it back into English for you. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Okay, thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Even snel nog, voordat je via het algoritme van je podcast-app, browser of simpelweg het leven zelf weer in een volgende ervaring tuimelt. Deze podcast is een productie van stichting NIVOZ, met een Z, dat samen met onderwijsprofessionals werkt aan menselijke onderwijs. We maken series over verschillende thema's rond onderwijs en pedagogiek. Die vind je, evenals ons NIVOZ-podcast hoofdkanaal, op NIVOZ.nl/podcast.